Welcome to the Run Strong Run podcast, where I amplify inspiring voices from the back of the pack and loudly proclaim all runners count. Without further ado, here's this week's inspiring runner. I say this every single time, but it's so true. I'm so excited to be joined here today with Carrie on the Run Strong Run podcast. Her and I met at the California International Marathon in 2023, and I just got to run with her again in 2024. And usually I reach out to people, say, hey, I'd love for you to be on the Run Strong Run podcast. But Carrie actually reached out to me and she said, Stephanie, I want to be on the Run Strong Run podcast. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and I want to be on it. And I said, Carrie, I love it. Let's have you on. So without further ado, welcome Carrie to the Run Run podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So let's start off. Tell me, I don't know too much about like your running background. I know that was one thing you wanted to talk about, like how you got into running. So give us a little backstory.
Sure. Okay. So it starts in 1983. I was 9, and there was a made-for-TV movie called The Terry Fox Story. I don't know if you're familiar. He's a big deal in Canada where he's from, but Terry Fox was a runner who he lost his leg to cancer as a child. And then he decided to do this Marathon of Hope to raise money for cancer research in Canada. And so he was from the West Coast of Canada, but he started on the East Coast and he ran through Canada raising money as he went along. And this was in the very early 80s. So before the internet existed before. But as he was running west, he got more and more press. So he almost went like viral, like the 80s version of viral as he was running on his journey. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. I think he collapsed at some point. He had a recurrence. He didn't know. He also had lung cancer and he had a relapse and he collapsed, I think, in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And it was just, I remember it was the first movie I ever cried at. And I put it in my mind like, oh, running, because he was so inspirational. And actually Terry Fox now, there are Terry Fox runs throughout. There's a Terry Fox Day in Canada. Terry Fox is now on the Canadian $5 bill. He's like a big Canadian legend in running, but that sort of planted the seed. And then I really started running. I went to college in Tacoma, Washington. I went to the University of Puget Sound and I was just cold a lot. So I tend to run cold. I have rainouts phenomenon, which is just basically bad circulation, like my hands and feet turn blue. And so I was just cold all the time. And running was like the best thing to do to warm up. And also when I was at my school at Puget Sound, they filmed this movie, Prefontaine. There were 2 movies about Steve Prefontaine, a runner an Olympian who I think your guest just mentioned him in your last podcast, actually. But there was this movie, Prefontaine, and it was actually filmed at my college with like people from my college in the background in Tacoma, Washington. And that movie was really great. And Steve Prefontaine is a really inspirational runner. So that was another thing. And then really what made me want to do. So I actually did my first half marathon when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. So it was the Mercer Island half. And I trained in Seattle. I learned the hard way that you should train on the type of terrain that you're going to be running, because I trained on very flat ground and it turned out to be a very hilly course. And I did not know that. So that was good. A lesson learned right off the bat. But then I moved down here to the Bay Area and I just started doing some events with different running communities. And that was another thing, is joining groups. I love community. I have a lot of friends through running. I was in a group through Fleet Feet, our local Fleet Feet track group. And Ethan, who was in charge of that group, told me I should watch the movie, The Spirit of the Marathon. And so that is what really made me decide to run my first marathon. And I would highly recommend that movie, The Spirit of the Marathon. I think you can just watch it on YouTube, but it talks about the history of running, and it actually profiles Dina Castor, who spoke last year at CIM, who is from Mammoth Lakes, California, and just a great documentary. And also they really show the course of Chicago. So that's why I wanted to do Chicago. And I knew Chicago was flat. And I also loved the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was filmed in Chicago. So it was like, oh, Chicago, I got to do that one. And then also in the movie, The Spirit of the Marathon, I forgot the name of the writer, but he was someone who was really another party in the back type guru. And he said about that marathon that they closed down Chicago for 7 hours. And he said, if you take any less than 7 hours, like you're not getting your money's worth. And so this 7 hour time limit, like that time limit made me feel like, okay, I can do it in that allotted time, even if I need to run, walk, or walk most of it. So that kind of, I felt like gave me the permission to run my first marathon. So I ran Chicago in 2012. And then I also did Napa shortly thereafter in 2013, another hilly one. And then I stopped for a while thinking I would just stick to halves and wouldn't do the full distance, full marathon again. But then during the pandemic, running really became such a part of my community because I was working from home. I wasn't seeing people. So running became such a huge part of my social life. And a group that I was running with was training to do the Marine Corps Marathon. So I wound up doing that and then doing more after that. Sorry, long answer to your question.
No, but I love that. First of all, I want to go back to Spirit of the Marathon, that movie. I have seen it and I love running inspired movies. And I am sad to say I don't know much about Terry Fox, right? That's his name?
Yes, yeah, Terry Fox. Yes.
So it sounds like I need to do more research on that. But
yes.
So Chicago Marathon in 2012, that was your first marathon?
Yes, yes. And that was the only other one where I took notes. I have notes from that one too. I did a rose and a thorn of each mile. Yes. So that was my first. Yeah.
So people who are listening probably don't know what you're referring to about taking notes, but in our most recent marathon together, CIM of 2024, Carrie was so funny. She carried around with her all 26.2 miles, a little notepad and a pen. And look, she has a little notepad right there with her, writing down. You collected mantras from runners around you. Is that correct? As well as a rose and a thorn?
Yes, as well as a rose and a thorn. So like a pro and a con of every mile and then a mantra. Yes. And yeah, just to give a little background for people who don't know me, I met Stephanie at CIM 2023, and I had a really tough time. I kind of half of my body broke down at mile 8, and I was just really demoralized and not having a great experience. And then Stephanie and her whole entourage, the party in the back, ran by me at about mile 18 or 19. And Stephanie, you're so amazing and so upbeat. And I was just having such a rough day, but being with you and with that whole group just completely turned that event around for me. And honestly, that was another reason I knew you were doing this past year. So I wanted to do it again. But the notes part, when I went to the expo this year, I asked in the Q&A, I asked people for their mantras. I said, when things are going rough for you, when you're having a tough time, what are the mantras that you say to yourself to keep yourself going? And you and the people on the panel gave such good answers that I was like, oh my goodness, I need to collect more mantras tomorrow during the race. So I did. I went, and I knew that you would be doing the run walk intervals. So I knew I would have a time to talk to people, even though we are walking at a pretty fast clip. But I knew that I would have the opportunity to ask people, because I didn't write it down at the expo, and I regret not having my pen and paper there. So I added that to my assignment. So I was like, I'm going to do a pro and a con and a mantra for every mile. I knew that I wanted it to be a really mindful marathon for me, because I wasn't running for time. That was not like, I was running just to have a good time, to experience the course. I love that course. I love there's so much crowd support. I love that part of CIM. It's such a well-run marathon that I wanted to do it again and just it was my first repeat too. So I wanted to, like, if I was going to do it again, I wanted like a different experience. So that was why I brought notes, and I took notes the whole time.
So I'm sure those who are listening or watching want to see all of these roses and thorns and mantras for maybe perhaps feel inspired or to use for your next marathon. So make sure you check out the show notes for a link, because I'm going to attach exactly what you collected for CIM 2024 because it is gold and I love it. So thank you so much for doing that. Tell me, one of the things you wanted to talk about was how you have reframed what like a personal record means to you. So can you speak more about that? Because I think sometimes as runners, people are constantly wanting to chase like their new personal best. And that can sometimes be a real slippery road because it can lead to injury, it can lead to burnout, it can really take away the joy of this sport, like the joy of running, the joy of your body carrying yourself 26.2 miles, which is never easy. So talk more about what you mean by that, about reframing your personal record.
Yes, I trained with Fleet Feet and I had a great experience with that group, but I was definitely the slowpoke of the group. I was always like I'd be like, bye, see you at the end, if that. So I was the slowest person in the group by quite a bit. And I know that some of the people I trained with were trying to Boston qualify or at least get their personal records or PR. So just do their fastest time. And we always do think, or runners tend to think of a personal record as a time-based thing, a personal record for time. But I decided I wanted to reframe it in that you can have a personal record in terms of enjoyment, in terms of note and mantra collecting, and in terms of how many high fives you get and receive, in terms of the funny signs. There's so many that you laugh at, and the dogs that you pet along the way. Just there's so many other ways that you can enjoy running, and it doesn't have to be speed based. And I was guilty of trying to push it myself and had some burnout and some pain. And as a result, that was why in 2023, I was having such a tough time because I was just like pushing myself and not really seeing the forest through the trees, as it were. And so that was something that, like, having you come and change the whole vibe that I was feeling at that point helped me appreciate that. And so you were such a good lesson in reframing, however, just bringing the joy into running.
Yeah. And if you're listening or watching and you want to run your first marathon, I highly do recommend joining us for the California International Marathon. Now, they do have a pretty strict 6-hour cutoff. And I was CIM's very first 6-hour pacer in 2021. So I paced 6 hours in 21, 2022, 2023. But then this most recent year, they moved me to 550, which kind of helped to provide that little buffer for people for that 6-hour cutoff, because it is a challenge sometimes for runners when they start in my pace group. I do think it's challenging to stay with a pace group all the way to the end, because that means you're running even splits for that whole marathon, which is not an easy thing to do. But so it's unfortunately some runners who start with me in the 550 group or the 6-hour group, they might fall off in those later miles, where it's very common that I pick up people in the later miles, just like how we ran into you on the course in 2023. But if you are listening, CIM is my biggest pace group out of all the marathons that I paced. I paced in 2024, I paced 11 full marathons, and CIM was definitely my biggest group. We have consistently 20 plus runners with us for 26.2 miles. And just like Carrie said, there's stories told, there's jokes told. Talk about just inspiring runners, that everyone has a story. Everyone has a story for showing up there at that starting line, whether it's your first marathon or you're someone like Bruce Malden, who was one of my first guests on the Run Strong Run podcast, episode 2, who he has run every single CIM since 1984. So talk about just like an inspiring group of runners. This is what keeps me coming back for more to pace marathons, because of what I get out of it. So selfishly, like getting to meet people like you, Carrie, who come up to me at the California International Marathon, which I want to get into this too, and bring me a 4-leaf clover that just, I can't tell you, Carrie, like how much this means to me, how much it meant to me and continues to mean to me. I carry around with me in my purse. It's just like little signs that help reaffirm to me, like, that is important to be this voice, to show up for the back of the pack, to bring the joy back to running. So thank you so much for showing up, for coming back to CIM, for being here on the podcast. But tell me more of the story behind this 4-leaf clover, because it sounds like this is something you do. You collect 4-leaf clovers.
Yes. So actually, one other thing I wanted to say about 2023 that made it even more magical. After I crossed the finish line, you end there at the state capitol building. My friend Paige, who is a Sacramento resident, met me at the finish line, and we just pulled over and we looked down. We were on the lawn there, and we were just completely surrounded by four-leaf clovers. And it was like, what? It was amazing. I did not expect that. But yes, I think I'm part leprechaun because I'm very good at finding four-leaf clovers. I think I'm a web developer, so I look at code a lot. So I never really found them until I was well into my 30s. And now I've found a bunch. But I look for them everywhere I go. And when I find them, I laminate them and then hand them out. And I live right near Dublin, California, which has a big Irish population and has a big Irish festival every year for St. Paddy's Day. And I go and bring four-leaf clovers, but they're just symbols to me of luck, and as they're supposed to be, but not just in the conventional way, but in the way that I think that you make your own luck. That luck is all about perspective. If you think of yourself as lucky, you are lucky. And so I think every four-leaf clover is a reminder of that. And yeah, so it's a thing. I like to hand them out to people when I feel like they need luck, and definitely in a marathon situation, that is the case. And actually, this year, I didn't find any after the race, but I stayed in Sacramento and I found some of the biggest ones in Sacramento that I've ever found in my life when I was just walking around, just like getting ready for the run. Yeah.
I love that. And you know what? To me, when I'm hearing you talk about luck and about how luck is how we frame it, to me in my mind, I'm thinking of gratitude, right? Because I feel like it goes hand in hand.
Definitely.
Because I don't really believe in just like things happen without a reason, like things happen for a reason. I don't really believe in coincidences. And I see these four-leaf clovers as you reminding people that there's always something to be grateful for, no matter what you're walking through, like even in a marathon, no matter what happens in that marathon, there's always something to be grateful for. I always like to remind runners around me in that 6 hour or 5:50 pace group is just think of all those people. One, you're lapping who are on the couch at home. So you're doing something also that 1% of the world's population is doing. And it doesn't matter how fast we go or how far we go. We're celebrating that we get to do this and that you chose to be here for a reason. You chose to show up. And so there's always something to be grateful for. And so it just reminds you of that. I just think that there's power in remembering that.
And yes, I definitely feel like that is luck and gratitude are so hand in hand, and like feeling lucky and feeling grateful, what four-leaf clovers are to me about, rather than just the luck part on its own. No, it's kind of like the background and the gratitude. And yeah, there's a quote that I'm trying to think of that I'll think of afterwards. But anyway, I'll send it to you.
Of course, because that's always how it happens.
Yes.
Also, something you noted when I sent you out a questionnaire about, hey, what all do you want to talk about in this podcast? You'd mentioned about why Johnny Cash's At Folsom Prison album from 1968 has influenced your running. So I'm very curious to know how this has influenced your running.
Yes, when I knew I was going to run CIM, I tried to find songs about Sacramento. So that was a thing I would do. Like when I trained for Chicago, I listened to the band Chicago and songs about Chicago, and there were a ton of them. For Sacramento, not so much. but I'm also a huge Johnny Cash fan. And he actually did 2 live prison albums, one in San Quentin and one at Folsom Prison. And they're both excellent. And in 2023, I noticed people on the course playing the songs, especially Folsom Prison Blues, obviously, because you start in Folsom, but some of the deeper cuts on the album too. And those are like some of the songs I listened to train and just loved. And so I love that there's like that connection. And then also, when you get to mile 25, there's a huge Johnny Cash mural right before, and that's a sign that you're almost done. So I was like looking for it at the end, like, where's Johnny Cash? Where's Johnny Cash? Yeah, so I love that album, and I love that there's so many great musicians along the way playing that great music as part of it. But because I was saying, it's hard to find songs about Sacramento, in my head, I repurposed San Francisco, open your golden gate. In my head, I was like, Sacramento, open your golden gate. I just rewrote it in my head for the marathon.
I love that. And it's so funny. Before you had mentioned about the big mural of Johnny Cash at mile 25, I don't think I ever had noticed that before.
I remember because I asked you, I'm like, where's Johnny Cash? And you were like, what? And I'm like, and we were like 10 feet away. And then we turned and then he was right there. And we were like, yay.
It's
Yes.
I don't know if this is good or bad or whatnot, but I tend to forget courses, just like how I can watch a movie when it comes out in movie theater and have forgotten the movie and watch it again. And it's like I'm watching it again for the first time. So I feel like sometimes about that. CIM is a race that I've run the most now. I think I've done it now 7 times, but there's still parts of the course where I feel like I'm running it for the very first time.
You have a lot going on while you have a lot to think about. And that was actually leading. If you don't mind, I would ask you some questions now. Is that okay?
I love it, Carrie. Shoot. Yes.
Uh, how do you prep your arms to hold the sign?
That's so funny. That's a question I'm often asked because if you notice, in my right hand, I have my handheld water bottle and the sign. And then my left hand, sometimes, not always, for CIM in 2024, I did not carry it. But like yesterday, at the time of this recording, yesterday I ran the Carlsbad Marathon and I actually held my Insta360 camera in my left hand. So both hands are taken up. And I really don't notice the sign holding the sign because I'm holding it in the same hand as my handheld water bottle. So I'm just naturally used to something in that hand. And so I don't really notice it. And sometimes it's actually beneficial to hold the pace sign because it can sometimes double as like protecting your face from the sun. Or I don't know. I find it such an honor to carry the pace sign that I don't really find it cumbersome, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. And I do know from listening to the podcast that you have a background in arm wrestling. So you have strong arms. Anyway. And then I
Yes.
was going to also ask you, you really do such a good job at the most exact splits when I run with you. Like for every, how do you know? Do you have a mental clock or like, how are you sure that you're hitting those times?
That's another great question. So, as pacers, we have a couple of ways to calculate our pace. So, first, you're using your GPS watch. What I'm using is a Coros Pace 3 is the current watch that I'm using. And so on my watch, I have my run walk intervals set. So my watch alerts me for CIM for pacing the 550 group. We ran 2 minutes, walked 1 minute. Is that correct? Yes, I believe we for the
Yes.
2 minutes running, it was about a 12:40 pace, and the walk pace was about 15 minutes, give or take, because I know that the course is actually going to be a little bit longer than 26.2. So I have to actually go a little bit faster than 12:40. So it's more kind of 12 minute 30 seconds pace per mile for those 2 minute run intervals, and then about 15 minutes per mile or maybe a little faster, sometimes a little slower. And so I'm using my watch to check my current pace for those run walk intervals. And then I also have my pace band, which any runner can print out a marathon pace band. A website I use is Marathon Guide. You can just Google like print out marathon pace band. If I'm printing out for myself, I'll print it just on regular paper. I wrap it in clear packaging tape and then tape it on my arm. And what that does is at every mile marker on a course, like for a race, at mile 1, I know I want to hit mile 1 at 13 minutes and 44 seconds per mile. And so I look down at my pace band and I look at my watch and I compare the elapsed time. So that means my time starts when I cross the starting line, which is different than like clock time. So my time doesn't start when the gun goes off and the first person crosses the starting line. My time goes off when I cross the starting line. And so my watch will say 13:30. And so I say, great job, everyone. We hit mile 1. We have a 14-second cushion. And so as a pacer, I never want my cushion to be greater than 1 minute because I don't want to go too fast to burn out my pace group. But also my goal is if I'm pacing 6 hours, I want to finish in between 5 hours, 59 minutes flat and 5 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. So you have a 1 minute window for you to finish in. And so every mile you're checking to see how far or off you are. And then throughout that mile, you're also checking your watch to check your pace.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, wow. Gosh, that's great. That's good to know. As you were speaking to, I thought of the quote that's about luck and gratitude, which is the secret to having everything is knowing that you already do. And that is what clovers remind me of. So just circling back, it just dawned on me as
Wait, can you say that again, Carrie, please?
The secret to having everything is knowing that you already do.
Ooh, that's so good. And it reminds me of when people say they're overwhelmed. And what I like the quote about overwhelm is that overwhelm is simply an abundance of everything you've ever wanted.
Oh, I love that too. That's
Because I
great.
think sometimes, like, so imagine moms can sometimes feel overwhelmed in motherhood. I know of myself, I can sometimes feel that way, but I prayed for so many years to become a mom. And so I have to remind myself, like, there were so many tears shed over wanting to become a mom. And so in those moments of overwhelm, I have an abundance of everything I've ever wanted. Or perhaps you're feeling overwhelmed in marathon training. And so it's just reminding yourself that, like, how long have you wanted to run a marathon? So instead of feeling overwhelmed in that moment, just imagine like you have an abundance of everything you've ever wanted, like right here, right now. It just helps you like ground yourself and to realize what you have, just kind of like the quote you just said too. So
Yes, I'm writing that down now too myself.
Carrie, I want to ask you one final question, and here's the question. What advice would you give to someone who wants to run a marathon or who wants to just start running? They're filled with maybe some fear or uncertainty, wondering if they actually belong out there on the race course. They feel like they're in the back of the pack. They worry that they're going to be too slow. So what advice would you give to that person?
First of all, I would have them watch the Spirit of the Marathon movie, and I would have them pick a marathon that has a longer time limit. I believe Chicago's a good flat one. I believe there's still a 7-hour time limit. And I would go, there is a whole sort of back of the pack community that I would get involved with. And there's the Slow AF Run Club. There's a book called Slow AF Run Club, Martinus Evans. He has great tips for slower runners. I would find a community that would be number one, because even if they're faster, you'll meet up with them afterwards. And just to have a group that you're involved with, that you're accountable to, because I think accountability is really important when you're starting to train for runs like that. And yeah, I would say also just make sure that you have a plan you can have a plan, but you have to let God at some point. Try to have a PR in something that's not speed related. So I'm going to give out as many high fives, or I'm going to read all the signs, or I'm going to drink water at all the hydration stations, something like that. So just something that's not speed related that will take your mind off of it. I also am a big proponent of taking notes, like to keep yourself mindful in this. Remember, especially if you're going to run your first, because I still love having the notes from Chicago from 2012. And so, yeah. And then a book I would recommend is called The Incomplete Book of Running by Peter Sagal. And he has these 3 G's of running, which are group, gradual, and goal. So get yourself a group, try to make some gradual progress, and then have a goal, like a marathon in mind at the end. So that's what I would say.
So many great tips and advice. Thank you. I'm like, I actually got a lot from that too. So I'm gonna have to, I have so many books I need to start reading after talking with you, Carrie, some movies I need to go watch. So thank you so much for being here on the podcast, for being a guest. Am I going to see you at CIM 2025?
I think so. I might be doing the relay though this time. I found out I have arthritis, so I'm cutting down my mileage a little bit. Abundance of caution. I'll get back to it. Maybe 2026 or 2027, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carrie, again, just thank you so much. You are a joy and a light to the world, to the running community, to CIM, to me and my life. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Run Strong Run podcast. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Run Strong Run or through my website at runstrongrun.com. You can support this podcast through a rating, review, or share. Until next time, run strong and run happy.